Wavelength.
You know, Adelaide has worked really hard over the last few years to build a small bar reputation. I was a kid, the big night in Adelaide was kind of, staying at home and watching the bill.
Sparking the combos about Adelaide.
As a female Sparky, I did get lots of comments on my gender.
You should be having...
Here to make a difference. Yeah, make the difference. Give the youth a voice.
On Fresh 92.7.
Welcome to Wavelength, sparking the convos about Adelaide you should be having. I'm your host, David, and tonight I'm joined by one of our reporters, Hamish, who will be co-hosting with me tonight. How are you doing, mate? Keen to get into it?
Yeah, good, mate. Yeah, I'm very keen. I wasn't sure I was going to be able to make it today. I almost lost my voice last night watching the footy, but I got on the herbal teas and seemed to be all good to go.
You love to see it.
Yeah, absolutely. Tonight, we'll be talking about Adelaide's intersex community. In recent years, a lot of attention has been brought to the struggles faced by those who identify as gay, lesbian or bisexual. We had the gay marriage vote a few years back, and just last week we spoke about how conversion therapy laws were to be overhauled. But one community in particular, the intersex community, is often overlooked in these kind of conversations. So we wanted to find out what challenges this particular part of the LGBTQI plus community still faces today.
Here's Adrian with the story.
Wavelength on Fresh 92.7.
If you ask your friends and family what an intersex person is, odds are a number of them won't be able to give you a proper answer. Being one of the arguably least represented sub-communities within the LGBTQIA+ spectrum means that they suffer different struggles than most of us aren't even aware of. That's why we talked to Lud Allen, the facilitator of sexual health and counselling services in Victor Harbour, who explained to us some of these struggles, starting by clarifying what exactly an intersex person is.
An intersex person is a person just like you and me. And definitions vary a little bit, but really it's someone, to make it more medically but easy to understand, that an intersex person is someone who was born with characteristics of both male and female reproductive systems. But I can't describe it because there are lots and lots and lots of intersex conditions. Intersex is an umbrella term. It doesn't mean this or this or this. And so it could be based in chromosomes. It could be all this other stuff. So again, we're talking about intersex, but the term still is very, very, very broad.
How would you differentiate gender roles versus their biological construct? So the distinction between intersex and gender.
As far as I'm concerned, as a sexual health counselor, our understanding of gender is the most harmful thing that we do to our young people. So we provide a process that says, be either this or be either that. If you are outside of that, we won't support you. That's why we see higher rates of suicide, depression, and higher rates of drug and alcohol abuse in any group that is in a minority position compared to the rest of our world.
What traditionally happens with intersex children? So say parents find out that the child is intersex, what normally happens next?
What normally particularly used to happen with the child is that people felt like they needed to have either a full vagina or a full penis. And so they were often subject to operations. They still are in parts of the United States. I was just reading about this yesterday, to operations that are really more like a clitoroplasty, where they try and make a vagina because they believe someone has to have one to be a fully functioning person.
Do you think that the process has changed over, say, the past 20 years in terms of intersex culture and upbringing?
Parents are subject to the support that they are getting from the medical community. So if a medical person says to parents who don't know much about this, they will follow that advice. And so it really depends on how the medical fraternity gives advice.
How does the education system teach and inform about intersex culture?
The education department is pretty crap at teaching about not just intersex culture, but teaching about diversity, teaching about gender diversity, teaching about the whole range of the human experience. They're not very good at that. I have yet to meet someone who will say, we were actually taught about this thing called intersex. If they do, what they will say is, you mean hermaphrodite, a negative term, and in fact, it's a rarity that hermaphrodite might exist. I reckon we need to start, instead of teaching specific conditions, specific LGBTIQ stuff, I think we start teaching about intersectionality. So where are the ways that we oppress people? And then we can go, this is one way that we oppress. You can say what we're doing is thinking because they are different, they are less. So we need to look at the ways that where the intersectionality exists, political, social, cultural, educational, all that sort of stuff.
How do you see that? Do you see that changing? And how would you be able to change that?
There's something called the sexuality flower model. Let's just say, as a human being, I put myself in the center of the flower, and I've got all these petals. All those petals make up my sexuality. So there's the political spectrum. There's the physical activity spectrum. There's relationships. All this stuff makes up who we are as a sexual being. We don't teach that. So we need to look at that in a bigger process, I think, and we need to include all those different petals in our discussions. That's what's missing when we're talking about people that are intersex, is we exclude intersex from the sexuality flower model.
What can we all do to enforce positive change for intersex culture?
Number one, educate yourself. Look it up. There's websites. There's an Australian website about that's run, developed, and processed by people with intersex. Check them out. My guess is that supporters, people within the LGBT community themselves don't know much about intersex. And so it's also their job to find out about this and go, but I don't know anything about you. I would start with Intersex Human Rights Australia. Fantastic website, lots of information. Let's just say you're a bit older and you just want someone to talk with, then I would suggest getting in touch with -18 that are acceptance of all diversity, and it run by young people.
Wavelength, sparking the convos about Adelaide you should be having on Fresh 92.7.
That there was Adrian and Jamie chatting with Lud Allen about Australia's intersex community. And it sort of raised for me, as someone who, I guess, identifies in the LGBT community, how little I actually knew about these problems. Like, even going into, when Adrian pitched the story to me, I was like, oh, yeah, I mean, I could probably brush up on some of my knowledge about this too. And that was a great chat with Lud.
Absolutely. Yeah, I feel like, it's when we talk about that kind of community, the I is at the end, and I think that's quite fitting, It often gets forgotten. And I certainly, my knowledge of it is very rudimentary, and that story was really enlightening.
I just want to say how impressed I was that Adrian and Jamie... Jamie's actually one of our new reporters. She joined the other week. They literally travelled all the way to Victor Harbour for that story, which is going so above and beyond. And
Absolutely.
I'm just so impressed.
Yeah, that's some real dedication.
It is.
And all our reporters do a ton of amazing work like that every single week. But we can only do that with the support of you, our amazing listeners. And you might have heard that Fresh is actually raising some money at the moment.
We are here at Wavelength. We are a really great training ground for reporters and broadcasters here in SA, and your donations will help this program to continue. If you can donate, please do. Just head to fresh927.com.au and donate to our Heartbeats fundraiser. It would mean a lot to us if you do. We'll be getting back into our story about Adelaide's intersex community soon, but right now let's throw to Hamish to find out what the hell is going on in politics this week.
What the hell is going on in politics at the moment? Wavelength on Fresh 92.7.
Yes, it's that time of the week where we dive into the biggest political stories of the last 7 days. So let's get straight to it. After the world was left reeling from the devastating explosion in Beirut on Tuesday, news emerged that ammonium nitrate, the chemical responsible for the blast, is currently stockpiled at 170 different sites in South Australia. But SafeWork SA has assured the public that these locations are safely monitored and that the largest amount currently hoarded is only 270 tonnes, which is about 10% the amount of that which went off in Lebanon's capital. Meanwhile, Rio Tinto has found itself facing a torrent of condemnation once again after it was revealed the mining giant destroyed two 46,000-year-old Aboriginal rock shelters so it could access a reserve of iron ore. In a parliamentary inquiry into the incident that occurred back in May this year, Rio Tinto's CEO revealed that there had been 3 alternative options to access the reserve, which would have preserved the sacred site, but did not reveal this information to the land's traditional owners. Also in the news, ScoMo tried to play peacekeeper between the US and China on Wednesday, urging the two conflicting nations to respect international law and seek a peaceful resolution to their growing feud. Morrison's attempts at counsel comes in the wake of the Trump administration putting the pressure on the PM to increase Australia's cooperation in the currently disputed South China Sea. Finally, the controversial no jab, no play laws came into effect in South Australian childcare centres this week, and the PM has reassured young Aussies that he won't be banning TikTok anytime soon, but users should be wary of its connection to the Chinese government. And that's what the hell's been going on in politics this week.
Wavelength, sparking the convos about Adelaide you should be having on Fresh 92.7.
Thank you for that, Hamish. Some crazy stuff this week. I'm a bit concerned about all the ammonium nitrate lying around.
Yeah, that's a little disconcerting, isn't it?
Just a bit.
Yeah, it definitely has me uncomfortable. I mean, Safe Work SA says it's all good, so I guess we've got to trust them on that one. But 270 tonnes still sounds like quite a lot, doesn't it?
Yeah, it is quite a fair bit. Also, I did notice that because Trump basically banned TikTok the other day.
Yeah, that's right.
The same day that Facebook launched a TikTok clone.
Yeah.
That's interesting.
Very convenient.
Extremely convenient, hey?
Wavelength.
The Wavelength, sparking the convos about Adelaide you should be having.
Before Adrian and Jamie spoke to Lud Allen, a counsellor based in Victor Harbour, about the intersex community and the struggles the community faces to this date.
But we wanted to get this story straight from the source. So Adrian and Jamie tracked down Astra, a 26-year-old intersex woman, to get the insider scoop.
Wavelength on Fresh 92.7.
After Jamie talked to Lud, we wanted to hear from an actual intersex person about the kind of struggles they still face today and what was their experience growing up. We talked to Astra, a 26-year-old intersex woman who lives in Adelaide, and we asked her if there was a big intersex community in our city.
Not so much, not that I've found. I only know personally one other out intersex person in Adelaide. Statistically, there's about 2,000 of us milling around, but a lot of people don't really want to disclose that part of themselves. A lot of people aren't even necessarily aware that they have a variation because it is something that is often overlooked by the medical field, unfortunately. Only about 1 in 10 of us ever actually get a proper diagnosis.
What role do you feel that intersex people play in the LGBTQI plus community?
Obviously, an unfortunate part that there is a lot of ignorance even within the queer community. For example, Ida Hobbit, May 17th, the International Day Against Homophobia, Biphobia, Endophobia and Transphobia. This year I started noticing quite a lot of very well-meaning people, solid organisations, very inclusive, very wholesome, very helpful, that just omitted completely the interphobia part of it because there's just that lack of awareness. People don't even know that we exist to a large degree.
Do you feel like you have to take the role of the educator at some times?
Very often, yes. Yes.
And then I'm assuming that's a very tiring job.
It is, yeah. Even within the medical field, I've had to go to doctors and say, I am intersex and you need to be aware of this for my care, because I've been through so many doctors that, they take down notes. This is a bit of a variation, but none of them would actually see it as a whole picture and part of who I am. It's just, it's a note in a book somewhere that gets forgotten.
What was your experience like growing up?
I thought I was just, a bit weird, maybe a bit of an outlier. And, there was obviously bullying that came with that, as there always is for, kids that are outliers. But I didn't have words for what I was, and nobody around me had the words for what I was. So it never really hit me as part of a social upbringing. It was just something that was always there in the background. I didn't actually sort of figure out that I was until a couple of years ago, and I went back through, pieced together different bits of my medical file after a friend came out to me as intersex, and I was just like, hey, I'll Google what that actually is.
How has it been for you in the medical scenario?
Quite difficult. I'm very lucky now. I've gotten a doctor now who, is aware of things. I explained some of my personal experience to her, and she's fully on board with providing the care that I need. But yeah, growing up without any acknowledgement at all, or any understanding or education, it was very, very lonely.
Did your parents educate you in any way in sex culture?
They didn't know that what intersex was. They didn't know it existed. So obviously I was born with a variation. I'm lucky enough that wasn't considered to be enough of a variation to require surgery, but it's something that was there, and my parents just kind of ignored it. And then growing up, noticed some more changes. got a lot of shame from that because I didn't know what they were. I didn't know what they meant. I went to a doctor who told me to ignore them.
What can we as allies do to enforce positive change in intersex culture?
Mostly just awareness. So it's that the acronym of LGBTQIA, the I stands for intersex, and to sort of include that when you're talking about the queer community, explicitly include intersex people as well as, everyone else. When you're pushing for queer rights and bodily autonomy and medical autonomy, that sort of stuff, just remember that this is a huge thing for intersex people as well as intersex people, and just sort of bring that awareness to your conversations and to your activism, and to sort of, just explicitly acknowledge that we exist and use that to raise awareness, and then we as a community can use that awareness to then push for more rights exist. And if you do feel like maybe you don't fit into these two very strict anatomical boxes, then definitely do your research, look at different resources that are out there, look for a queer-friendly and sex-friendly sort of medical office. For example, Shine is a really good one in South Australia. Just find a doctor who's willing to sort of talk this through with you and explain it. Go out and look into it, because there's a strong possibility, a 1 in 50 chance approximately, that you might actually be part of our intersex community.
Wavelength, sparking the combos about Adelaide you should be having on Fresh 92.7.
That was Adrian chatting with Astra about Adelaide's intersex community. Certainly a lot to unpack there, and thank you first of all to Astra for being so open with your story about your journey, I suppose. Just a couple of things that really stood out to me is, like, one, it seems like the medical profession I don't know if it's just because it was because they're 26, maybe things have changed now, but it seems like they were sort of let down by the medical profession.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, it sounds like the ignorance kind of permeates not just the general public, but even the medical community, which is especially disappointing because they're who you turn to, and like they said in the previous story, they're the ones we listen to. As parents, if you were to have an intersex child, you're going to go with medical advice more often than not. Yeah. And it sounds like it starts from the top. It's wrong in a lot of cases from that perspective, from the get-go.
Especially with something about, it's all very about your body, and parents can hardly be blamed for not understanding. Yeah. I mean, like I said before, I hardly know anything. So if I were to have a child that was intersex and doctor just told me what to do, I'd probably listen to them.
Yeah, exactly.
So
I think most people would. So, that's why it's so important that aspect of this conversation gets it right from the get-go, because, as you said, it's a major decision that you're making that's going to alter the course of someone's entire life, and it's one that they don't get a say in. So you better make sure it's the right one.
Totally. As Astra mentioned in that piece just then, Shine SA, they're there for you. If you're someone this has raised something for you and you want to talk to someone, definitely go to Shine.
Yeah, they're great 100% guys.
100% recommend, and they're great friends of Wavelength. So that's my advice, I suppose. My unqualified advice.
Wavelength.
Right now, we're getting into our weekly segment where Wavelength explains what has happened with the coronavirus in Australia this week.
Wavelength on Fresh 92.7.
Life in little old Adelaide hasn't been too bad these last few months. Infection rates have been low, almost non-existent. Shops have stayed open. Pubs started pouring out drinks again, thank God. And we're yet to suffer from the oppression of mandated face masks. Hell, this week I even got to go to an AFL game with 15,000 other fans, which was both weird and amazing. Being around that many people again felt naughty somehow. But just across the border, things haven't been so cheery. In fact, the situation in Victoria has become straight up terrifying. And as Melbourne lived through its first night of some of the strictest restrictions in the world, which included a hard curfew and thousands of police officers patrolling the streets like some dystopian nightmare, over here we watched on in cautious apprehension and asked, is the dreaded second wave headed our way? The answer to that question is still unclear, but there's certainly been some cause for concern. After recording a number of new cases this week, we've unfortunately seen some restrictions come back into effect. As of Tuesday, the limit on home gatherings has dropped back down from 50 people to just 10, and patrons are to be seated at all times in restaurants and pubs if they've got a drink in hand. The cases in question that have sparked this reactionary response from Premier Stephen Marshall are linked to a cluster of cases that originated from the Theberton Senior College. Yes, we officially have a cluster, and yes, I know how ominous that sounds. But our leading lady and Chief Health Officer, Nicola Spurrier, has assured us the situation is under control, with a major contact tracing operation resulting in 1,100 people going into self-isolation and 94 close contacts ordered into quarantine at hotels around Adelaide. The swift response has meant that further restrictions on aged care facilities and gyms have been avoided for now. Still, it's up to you to do the right thing and keep Adelaide as uneventful as always, just how we like it. Continue to social distance, wash your hands, keep it tuned on Fresh to stay up to date with the latest COVID-19 news and alerts, and stay safe, Adelaide.
Wavelength, sparking the convos about Adelaide you should be having on Fresh 92.7.
That there was Hamish again, letting you know everything you need to know about the coronavirus this week.
Is everybody sick of me yet? Or do we still have any listeners on board?
They've all left.
Yeah, the phone lines are dead.
Yeah, you were telling me before you've already experienced firsthand these new restrictions.
Yeah. So I just went out last night, went to the Cooper's Ale House, and then went to Holy Moly, and holy moly, it was, oh dear God, it was pandemonium. Seriously, it was, you would think something as simple as not being able to have a drink in your hand while you're standing would not be that big of a deal. But yeah, honestly, it's having to get drinks through table service. It's just an absolute nightmare. We were, told to go back to our tables, and we sat down there, and we had absolutely no one come anywhere near our table for about 30 minutes. And, you had police kind of prowling, holy moly, making sure everyone was doing the right thing. And, man, that is just such a buzzkill.
So strange too, just like police crawling all over this like mini golf place.
Yeah, man, it's like having your parents at a party. Like, it's just not right, man.
Also, super sad about Victoria. Obviously, stage 4 came into effect last week.
Yeah.
And obviously our thoughts are with everyone, all of our listeners from Victoria. I know it's super hard for you guys over there, so
100%.
Hope we can all get through this, and hopefully we don't have a similar situation in Adelaide anytime soon.
Yeah, dear God, please.
Would not like that.
Wavelength.
There's plenty of sad news hanging about these days, which is why our next segment should put a smile on your face. This week, Andrew will be bringing you our weekly segment, Heaps Good News.
I know there's gonna be
Heaps Good News on Wavelength.
While the world may be in the grips of a global pandemic, there's still plenty of good things happening. Some right in our very own backyard. We're here to hopefully bring a bit of a smile to your face. Well, to kick things off, you may have noticed that while it's been absolutely freezing recently, which is, pretty typical for winter, there's been just about no rain for the last month or so. While that's leaving things pretty dry, the Bureau of Meteorology is forecasting some more rain to come in the next few days, which should keep things nice and green. Meanwhile, it's good news for Port Adelaide fans as the club generally continues its run of success this season. It was a close call in their clash with the Western Bulldogs last Monday, however they came through to win by 13 points. The Power remains pretty firmly on top of the AFL ladder, giving South Aussies something to be positive about. Having crowds back at Adelaide Oval for the footy is also giving us some much needed boost of happiness, even if the Crows can't quite do the same. Turning to the animal kingdom now, and a Queensland woman's been given an award by animal rights group PETA Australia after nursing a huntsman spider back to health. Alina Walsh from Townsville found the arachnid with just 2 legs and spent the month hand-feeding the spider, nicknamed Peggy, as it grew its other 6 legs back. PETA gave Miss Walsh the Hero to Animals award, with Peggy expected to stay with her until its new legs are stronger. And looking to the sky, 2 astronauts on the latest SpaceX expedition to the International Space Station have safely touched down back on Earth, the mission ultimately a success for Elon Musk's company. More crew launches are expected, with tourist flights potentially on the cards down the track. Sadly for the astronauts, a global pandemic's probably not something you want to come back to. And that's just a taste of the good things going on, but during the crisis, make sure you switch off now and again, treat each other with respect and care, and remember,
always look on the bright side of life.
Wavelength, Sparking the convos about Adelaide you should be having on Fresh 92.7.
Thank you for that, Andrew, and thank you everyone for listening. That brings us to the close of the show, unfortunately.
Yeah, it's been a good show, and make sure you subscribe to the Wavelength podcast on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or anywhere else you get your podcasts. You can listen back to all our old episodes right now.
Wavelength.